I always tell managers and leadership this: if it wasn't for your employees, this company
Mhm.
wouldn't be functioning.
That's right.
And so you have to make sure that they are supported. And maybe you're not going to drop, like, we're paying 100% for you and your dependents, and we're not going to
Right.
drop like a $2,000 learning and development or training and development
Yeah.
stipend. It's not about that, but it's like maybe if we can give a little bit right now,
Mhm.
and then we can see the response to it, we can
Yeah.
continue growing it. Um,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I pushed it to them.
Welcome to the new chapter of the Her Resources podcast. I'm your host, Linda Misegadis, and I'm so excited to be stepping into this next season with you solo. This podcast has always been about amplifying women's voices, exploring the challenges we face in HR, leadership, and life, and sharing the tools and inspiration we need to thrive. And now, I'm taking that mission even deeper. You'll hear real conversations with bold and authentic women, as well as reflections from me on everything from pay equity and burnout to confidence, leadership, and the messy, beautiful journey of growth. This is more than just a podcast, it's a community, a space for us to learn, lead, and lift each other up. Welcome to this new beginning. This is the Her Resources Podcast. Let's get started. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Her Resources Podcast. This is a podcast where we explore the real challenges and real opportunities shaping women's lives at work and the leaders who are reimagining what's possible. I'm your host, Linda Misegadis, and today's conversation sits at the intersection of work, parenthood, and the powerful role that HR can play in designing benefits that truly support people, not just policies on paper. I'm excited to welcome today's guest, Jenilee Angeles-Pasco. Jenilee is an HR leader who has spent her career supporting employees and managers at the intersection of work and life. She brings deeply practical, human-centered perspective on how organizations can design benefits that actually work for people in the moments that matter most, especially for working parents and caregivers. In this episode, we're going to talk about where traditional benefits fall short, what working parents really need, and how HR leaders can move from checking boxes to creating meaningful impact. Welcome to the studio, Jenilee.
Thank you so much, Linda, for having me. And
Yeah, I'm
it's an
so
honor to be
excited.
here.
Oh,
Thank
well, it's an honor to have you here for sure. And this is a great topic and a perfect time because everybody probably just finished open enrollment at the probably back in the October, November timeframe. And so new benefits started, new year. And so this is a great topic, I think, of conversation for us. But to kind of get us started, can you tell us a little bit about your career journey and kind of what drew you into HR in the first place?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been in HR for over 10 years now. The reason I got into it was I was working at a post production company in Hollywood. And, we were growing. And it was like, hey, we don't have an HR person here. So I went up to our president at that time and I was like, I think, as we scale, we need to make sure that we have policies and compliance
Yeah.
and to make sure that people are supported. So that's sort of where my journey started. And I've been in post production, I've been in biotech, advertisement companies, gaming companies, crypto companies, and now I'm at RunPod. And so I've slowly gotten myself into tech. And I think tech HR is a whole different animal.
Yeah.
I think tech scales so fast, and
Mhm.
they sort of kind of bring HR a little bit later than
It's true.
normal. But I think RunPod, the way that they did it was they brought HR right when they were scaling. So that was
Oh,
like,
nice.
yeah. So I was a support from the beginning of when they started scaling the company, and I was able to build out benefits, that pretty much is growing with us. And
Absolutely.
my biggest theme in my HR journey is, I think for me, I got into it because I didn't feel like I was supported back in my early career.
Mm,
And so I
sure.
wanted to make sure that people felt that way too in their jobs. So my motto in HR is very human centric. I got into it because I wanted to make sure people were supported.
I
Um,
like
I
that.
think that's very important. So
I think it is too. Well, and you've really spent, as you've throughout your career and kind of thinking about that whole, I don't like the word work-life balance, because there
Mhm,
is no such thing as work-life balance, but there is a blending of work and life for
mhm.
sure. But was there like a particular moment or an experience that really shaped how you think about benefits and support?
I think it was when I became a parent, and
Mhm.
it was kind of just like benefits are made so that, you're supporting your employees, right? But
Right, yeah.
you're thinking like, what is it who is it attracting? I mean, you could
Mhm.
always, attract younger, like, out of college employees, and then it's like, what happens
Mhm.
to them? How do we retain them? How do we make sure
Right.
that when they're coming in at 20 to 23 years old, they're thinking, "This is the place I wanna stay, and I
Mhm.
can grow here," because they actually take care of employees. They have benefits for not only me, but for my family or
Mhm.
and, like, so I think one of the biggest, benefits that I think is like a double-edged sword is the flex PTO. Um,
Yes,
you
yeah.
know, I think people think like, "Oh, if it's flex PTO, it's just there, I can take it." But
Yeah.
it should be driven by leaders and managers to be like, "Hey, you guys have to use this. Make sure that you're, taking care of yourselves. We don't want you to burn out," especially in tech, in startups. It's you work so fast, so hard. You wear many
So
different
true.
hats. And so you kind of forget, you're like, "Oh, I'll take it. It's just there." And then next thing you know, it's like August, September, October, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't
Yeah.
taken time off yet," because it's so flexible that you're just basically like pushing it off. And I think as managers should be able to be the ones driving it, right? And
Mhm.
supporting it. Because to me, benefits and perks, it's only as
Mhm.
good as like if the managers really truly believe in it.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true. I think that's a really good point, and particularly around the PTO and thinking about it from that perspective. A lot of organizations went to unlimited PTO, and
Mhm,
that was touted as this big benefit. But studies really show people actually took a lot less time. There's
mhm,
something about knowing how much time you have. So if you know you have 2 weeks of vacation or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever it is, you kind of have this, need to take it then, right?
mhm,
And even back in the old days of the use it or lose it policies, that were out there, it created that sense of urgency. You're right, with all that flexibility, it's, "Well, I'll get to it when I get to it," type of thing. I think that I don't know what they thought was going to happen when they moved to that model, but I think you're absolutely right. If you don't have management and leadership really supporting and encouraging it, employees can find themselves just not taking time off.
yes, and, the same thing for when I implemented Summer Fridays at Run Pod, and I also implemented the winter holiday break. Those were sent over to leadership. It was basically like, "How do you feel about this?" So I actually started Summer Fridays, as a
Yeah, tell us
pilot.
what those are. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
curious.
So Summer Fridays was it was half days off on Fridays for every other
Okay,
Friday. We couldn't do it every Friday because like I said, we're a startup,
sure.
we're really
Yeah,
busy. But I was like, "Hey, what can we do so employees can actually take some time off in the summer?" Right? Like
yeah.
on a small scale. And so it was like, why don't we do Summer Fridays every other Fridays? What we did was we bookended it with
Okay.
Memorial Day, and then started Summer Fridays every other Fridays, and then we
Oh,
ended
nice.
it with a 4-day weekend on Labor Day. And I think a lot of the employees appreciated it because it felt like when you're taking time off as an entire company, you don't
Mhm.
feel the guilt of like, oh,
That is
somebody's working.
true.
And I mean, there
Yeah.
are people who would work, but we would be like, hey, if you're working, please talk to your managers and make sure that you
Ye
take the time off sometime else,
Oh,
so
for
they
sure.
don't feel like, oh, I didn't even get that time off. So
Yeah.
we made sure to cover all our bases and make sure that employees can actually take that time off. And the leaders really did I think they did their best to really promote it and say like, let them know weeks before, like, hey, we're having this. Let me know what's on your plate that we can
Yeah.
offload so you can actually take your Fridays off.
I
Um,
like that.
and and with the success of Summer Fridays, I was able
Yeah.
to implement the winter holiday break, which was from Christmas Eve until the day after New Year's. But then, like, because it fell on a Friday, we got to come back to work on Monday. So it was
Yeah.
really nice. I think it was nice for everybody to actually enjoy their holidays.
Absolutely. I think that is really nice. There are a few companies I've seen that shut down. I see it more in Europe than I do in the United States, but that actually shut down those last 2 weeks of the year. It's,
Hmm.
through Christmas and New Year. And I do think there's something about that. And it seems that most organizations don't feel like, I'm sure not every industry could do that, but where you can do it, it is a really nice break. And you're right, there's something about the whole company taking that time off
Hmm.
that you don't feel like, oh gosh, everybody else is at work and here I've got this time off. And it kind of eliminates too that competition that can happen sometimes for everybody vying to get that time off. If it's just the standard, then you don't really have
Right,
that situation. So yeah. That's
right.
absolutely, I like that. That's
Thank
really cool.
you.
When you presented those ideas to management, how did they react to it? Like, how did you bring that forward? How did you put together your business plan around saying, "Hey, I think we should do this"?
I think for me, it was we have an anonymous feedback.
Okay.
And so, a lot of employees were like, we're kind of feeling a little bit burnt out. Like, what can we
Yeah.
do? So I figured like, what can we do as an entire company to take that actual time off instead of it just
Yeah.
being like, hey, we're promoting our flexible time off. You can always take it.
Mhm.
But, I think not just at my company, but in a lot of companies, if you take that time off, then you're just going to come back to work with more work. Right. And
I
that's
agree.
kind of like
Yeah.
the hesitation of, this is why I don't want
Mhm.
to take time off because I'm going to get pinged anyway from the people who are
Yeah.
working there, or I'm going to come back with more emails, more
Mhm.
Slack messages. And so we tried eliminating that and of
Yeah.
like the mentality of like, if everybody takes time off,
Mhm.
then they don't have that guilt. So that's
Right.
kind of how I presented it. And it was kind of more of a retention thing too. Like
Uh-huh.
if we were to want to retain our top talent, especially like our employees, what can we do to make sure that they don't burn out? What can we
Right.
do to make sure that they feel valued, for their hard work? And so even in a small scale like Summer Fridays and taking it off from 12 o'clock on or 1 o'clock on, yeah, it's
Yeah.
only like maybe 4 hours, but it does make a
Mhm.
difference because a lot of employees were like, oh, I got to go to my doctor's appointments and I got to actually
Yeah.
schedule something out that normally closes like at 3 p.m. and I couldn't go.
Right.
So it was nice to hear. But in business case, it was just like, how do we attract talent, right? We're
Yes.
competitive in our competitive tech market. What can
Mhm.
we do to make sure that we're as competitive as like the bigger tech companies like Google and
Right.
Apple,
Yeah.
OpenAI and all these emerging startups? We have to stay
Mhm.
competitive with them if we're going to be able to keep our employees happy and retain them.
That is so true. Well, and that's a good transition into kind of parenthood and work because I know one of the things that was really important to you is thinking about benefits that actually work. And one of the biggest challenges working parents are facing today is that organizations really kind of they still underestimate, the impact of raising a family and trying to balance all of that. So talk a little bit about that because I know when you and I were chatting before, you were talking about the idea of creating those early benefits, which might attract those younger people. But those younger people are going to, if you want to retain them, they are going to maybe they get married, maybe they have children, and now
Mhm.
their lives change, which means their needs change. So, talk a little bit about why that's so important to you.
Yeah, that was important to me because when I worked at the other companies I worked at, it was like looking at the handbook, I'm like, what policies do we have that
Mm,
actually support parents, right? Because,
yeah.
the 9 to 5 hustle and grind, it's like, how do you pick up, how do you drop off your kids? I mean, you drop off your kids at
Hmm.
7 before you get to work, but then if
Right.
school's let off at 3 o'clock and you're still at work,
Yeah.
then what happens then, right?
Yeah.
So I was kind of trying to figure out like, how can we make that more sustainable for parents? I
Hmm.
mean, not everybody could afford childcare. Um,
Right.
it's very expensive unless your employee has some sort of like childcare
True.
benefits, which is
Yeah.
very, very rare. But I think where I'm at right now at RunPod, it's very flexible in that
Mm,
you're just like, hey, I need to pick my kid up. And then your manager
yeah.
understands, and then you kind of figure out like what that transition looks like or what that your day looks like in that sense. And I think, like I said, it starts with the managers,
Right.
making sure that their direct reports are supported. Because if you feel like your manager is going to guilt trip you into something
Hmm.
or make you feel guilty about leaving work for 30 minutes to pick up your kid, then
Yeah.
that's not sustainable. As an employee, you're
Hmm.
going to feel like you're not supported. And so I think when I was thinking about benefits, the first thing that came into my mind was paid parental leave. Um,
Right.
I'm in California, so we're a little bit more supported when it comes to like if you
Hmm.
need to take time off, we have the state benefits and we have country's benefits, right? But at the same time, it's like,
Right.
what's your work doing for you?
Hmm.
And when I was at RunPod, we had about 30, 40 people at that time. And this was something I did bring up to leadership, and they were all for it. And it was
Yeah.
great to see because it was like, yeah, we're not just gonna be attracting young talent, right? I mean,
Right.
startups, when you think about it, you think about like young people who are just coming
You
into,
do. It's kind of that
yeah,
energy. And
yeah.
yes, exactly.
But
Yeah.
what
Yep, for
happens
sure.
when they're here for a long time and then, like you said,
Hmm.
they get married and they have a family, and
Right.
the first year I was here and I implemented it, of course nobody was taking it because it was just we were still a small company.
Right.
But now we're like about 80 people, and I know like 5 dads, actual like fathers who are on it. So it's pretty cool because it's like it's not only, I think another thing is they think only mothers use it or women
That
use
is
it,
very true.
right?
Yeah.
So actually, right now, it's only the dads who are using it at my company, which I thought was like, this is really cool because now they can see the
Yeah.
value in it of like, hey, fathers can
Absolutely.
use it as well. And it's going to be helping their wives. And I think their
Yes.
wives are going to feel better about like, hey, maybe I can go to work and then my husband can take the time off, or their partners,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So I think it doesn't only help you, it helps also your partner be able to do their
Yes.
best work.
I totally agree with that. It is really hard, and I think back, like back when I was having kids, and you didn't have access to those
Mhm.
benefits. And I remember I was working for a CPA firm. I went back to work 2 weeks after I had my first child because
Wow.
he was born during tax season, and I had to get back to work. And so it was just it was a different time, and it's interesting too because we joke about it, but we almost pretended like we didn't have children, right? You didn't want to let people,
Yeah.
your employer, know whether it mostly fell to women, but even in for men, you didn't want to say that the reason why you were taking the day off was because your child needed something, or kind of to your point, if your kids were going to school or they had a school program and you wanted to go and do that, there
Mhm.
wasn't the flexibility to like run out and leave and go to their event and then maybe you come back to work, whatever that is. That flexibility didn't really exist, and so it created a weird dynamic, I think, between the employee-employer relationship, which probably COVID changed when we brought
Mhm.
work into our homes. It kind of changed the dynamics about that. I have exciting news. The Her Resources podcast is opening sponsorships. If your brand supports women in HR and leadership, think talent, well being, learning, pay equity, coaching, productivity, or mission driven tech. This is your moment. Our listeners are decision makers and change makers who show up for real conversations and practical tools every week. We offer flexible options, pre-roll or mid-roll host reads, series sponsorships, and thought leadership integrations that highlight your story without the fluff. Ready to connect with a highly engaged audience and grow with us? Email contact@herresourcespodcast.com and put sponsorship in the subject line. I can't wait to collaborate. But where do you kind of see the biggest disconnect between the benefits that companies offer and what employees actually need?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like where I see most that benefits are designed around big moments, like parental leave, and not the
Yes.
everyday realities, that come
Yeah.
after. Things like daycare, drop-offs, pickups, school events, like we were
Right.
talking about.
Yeah.
So those are the moments where people actually feel seen, and what
Yes.
flexibility comes with, what benefits the flexibility it comes with. And I think those are rarely addressed. And I think as you design benefits, especially in an
Mhm.
HR role, as you design benefits, you think about one, who your employees are, who are you
Right.
trying to attract, and who you're trying to retain. I think there's a lot of there's I mean, I'm in a remote company. So
Yeah.
so that's already sort of been a challenge because
Mhm.
it's kind of, I think, in a remote company, you have all the flexibility, and I think if your manager supports you
Yeah.
the right way, you're able to really, not grow, but you're able to really thrive in your career.
It is true. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's true. Yeah, I think it helps because and I know that there's still a lot of organizations, and especially right now, trying to push to get employees back in the office. But I agree with you. I think there's a level of flexibility that comes from that. And if you are well supported, then, I think the days of thinking that we had to work from, 9 to 5, and that was
Mhm.
the only time you could operate. The world is a 24/7 world
Yeah.
today, like, you're always on, and so the reality of the situation is that in many organizations, and again, it all depends on the industry, but in many organizations, you don't need to have that traditional 9 to 5 kind of way of doing things, and
Mhm.
if you can shift to having a trusting relationship with your employees, which is so important in a remote environment, it kinda opens that up, and it does allow you to thrive because maybe you start your day at 10 because I was on a call this morning with one of my colleagues, and she said, "Just letting everybody know, like, I'm in the zone right now because, she's doing the call with us, but she's getting her kids ready for school to head off,
Mhm.
so she's making breakfast, she's packing lunches, and so she just wasn't on the camera, but she had that flexibility to be able to do that so she could still take care of what she needed to
Yeah.
and get her kids off to school as well, so
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you asked, like, what the biggest disconnect would be, right?
yeah,
Between the real benefits and, like, what employees really need. And I think the biggest
yeah,
disconnect that I've seen are their benefits are often designed, without enough input from the people that they're
and that's a
actually
good
made
point.
for. And
Yeah,
so leadership might be solving for what sounds like generous, right? Like, oh, we're going to give this
mhm,
much and 100% towards your health benefits. But employees, I
yeah,
think they're struggling with more like what the access is, the clarity, or feeling like
mm,
safe on what actually is offered. Because
yeah,
maybe they feel like, oh, this is not for me. I don't have any kids. Like, so
mhm,
what about me? So I think a benefit does not work if employees feel like they need permission or they worry about the
yeah.
consequences of using it.
That's a really good point. A friend of our podcast, Danae Wilson, she wrote a book called Changemakers Wanted, and in her book, she talks about developing individual flexible benefit plans. And so, really kind of looking at it to your point, because while we talk a lot about families and children and dealing with that from a parent side of it, there are a lot of people who don't have children,
Right.
and so you've got to think about what are their needs and what's important to them. And so, really kind of trying to individualize as much as you can, even if it is groupings of employees, to be able to say, here's what we're doing, here's what we're offering to you, or at least giving those benefits. But I think you're right. We're very stuck in a traditional way
Right.
of giving benefits, and a company thinks, well, I'm giving you all of these things.
Hmm.
But maybe that's not what the employees are actually needing based on where they are in their lives. So,
Yeah. And I mean, like, as much as I think about parents, I think about those employees that we have that are not parents. And it's like, what would they
right.
want? So,
Yeah.
we actually offer health and wellness stipends. And we
Okay.
also offer training and development.
Oh,
So,
that's fantastic.
yeah. And it's like, you can also make your like do something outside of this and we're going to
Yeah,
support you. I think,
absolutely.
when people think of health benefits, they just think of like physical health, right? They don't think of mental health.
Right.
So this health
So
and
true.
wellness is very much given to them so they can do
Yeah.
something with it. Like, I don't know, download an app or subscribe to something, or like, it's so funny because they're like, can we use this for mental health? I'm like, look, if it makes you feel good about yourself mentally, emotionally,
Yes.
yes, use it towards that because
Absolutely.
you don't want restrictions on those either. And
That is true.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's very
No.
much it's very much what do employees want. And also, it's going to be like, oh wow, I can use my training and development stipend to better myself, in my
Right.
career. So those are things
Yeah.
that outside of the whole like for children or yourself or your
Mhm.
spouse, this is something that you can also use.
That's a good point. I'm curious on the when you think about it from the continuing education side, have you started to notice that organizations are making a shift? Again, I remember back when they first started putting those types of benefits in place for employees to do continuing education, it was focused on the job that they're doing today. The problem with that is it doesn't really promote
Mhm.
development, and I know why organizations did it. They didn't want to spend money to invest in, Jenilee's now gonna go and take all this great education. She's gonna go somewhere else and
Mhm.
use what we provided to her. So I think, I understand you've got to have some guardrails around it, but by making it so specific, I think you also kind of stifle your employees. So are you starting to see like when organizations are looking at those types of benefits, maybe they're looking at those through a different lens as well?
Yes. I mean, I work for a company that, we touch a lot of everything in tech, and it's like tech is so big in that it's like, I want to
Yes.
learn about AI. I want to learn about machine learning. I want to
Yeah.
learn about all these things. So even if I'm in HR, I'm so curious to know like some of the words that they use in my company. I'm just like, what does that even mean? So I can
Yeah.
go into that without my employers thinking, oh my God, John, going to try because just tech
Right.
is so vast and
It
you want to
is.
be able to learn what your colleagues know. So this kind of
Yeah.
affords you the chance to also elevate yourself, your knowledge
Yeah.
in that way,
I totally
So
agree.
it's not
Well, and we talk a
as
lot about
restrictive.
about the skills gap, right? Because
Yeah.
we have a huge issue today with the skills gap. Well, a lot of the reason why we have the skills gap is we keep our employees kind of in their boxes. And
Hmm.
unless the employee goes and does all of this stuff on their own, there is no opportunity for that growth. And so I think if employers encourage them to look at that, especially as you were talking about with tech, it's changing so fast and we want our
Hmm.
employees to stay up to date on it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
No,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. Well, so what role do you think that HR should play in advocating for more human-centered benefit design? Because I think there's a component of it that's HR, right? And then there's a component of
Hmm.
it that's the leadership. Because if you take those ideas to your leaders and they say, no, generally, we're not going to do this. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. So, but what role should HR play in really helping to advocate for that?
I think the power HR has to influence is meaningful and practical, like practical benefits, right? So our real proximity in HR is that's our real power is the proximity. And I think I see patterns before they become problems and
Yeah.
I hear the same concerns. So I kind of make sure that whatever those are is what I bring over to leadership. So it gives me the ability to translate like the lived experience into the
Mm-hmm.
systems leaders can actually use.
Mm,
Um, I think when HR brings both the data and real examples to leadership, it becomes much easier to design benefits that are practical rather than
mm-hmm.
performance.
Yeah.
So I think, being like, looking at our employee pool and being like, oh, what do they want? Especially I think I'm going to
Mhm.
bring this up again in tech. It's like so many new things come up, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, what if they wanted to learn more? Will that money
Yeah.
come out of their own pocket or do we want to invest
True.
in their knowledge and
Right.
as a company if you want your employees to learn more about like what we're working
Mhm.
on you'd have to invest in them in that way
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of companies I know they do like learning and development within their companies
Right.
but
Mhm.
sometimes some people are curious to see what else is out there so
That's
I
true.
think
Yeah.
the training and development stipends like help that and
Mhm.
then, even the health and wellness, like mental health is different to a lot of people. Like they do
That
different
is
things
true.
for themselves. It's not like
Yeah.
a one size fits all. It's like you want
Mhm.
to go use it for this or you want to use it for this, whatever makes you feel healthier, like mentally and emotionally and
Yeah.
physically, then that's what you do. So I think it gives them the flexibility to be able to kind of choose what they want for themselves instead of like, here
Yeah.
you go, listen to this seminar and it's going to
Mhm.
promote mental health and wellness. And we check off that box. You don't want that.
No, that is so true, and I think that's a really good point, and it kinda comes back to thinking about how can we make sure that we offer, a wide enough variety for
Mhm.
our employees to be able to pick and choose what is gonna make the most sense for them.
Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Let LJM Productions help you sound your best. We specialize in podcast editing, production, audio restoration, and mixing, ensuring every episode is polished, professional, and ready to wow your audience. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned podcaster, we'll handle the technical details so you can focus on sharing your voice. Partner with LJM Productions today and hear the difference.
Right.
I'm curious from your perspective, like, how do HR leaders effectively influence the decision makers when benefits are often seen more as like a cost than an investment?
I think, when you have that data, I mean, it's a little tricky, especially in a startup,
Yeah.
because,
Oh, for sure.
it's like, oh, well, why do we need those right now? And
Mhm.
um, I think just in the startups that I've worked at, it was like seen as like any benefit you put out there, it's going to cost money. And I understand
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, it's kind of like I always tell managers and leadership this: if it wasn't for your employees, this company
Mhm.
wouldn't be functioning.
That's right.
And so you have to make sure that they are supported. And maybe you're not going to drop like, we're paying 100% for you and your dependents, and we're not going to
Right.
drop like a $2,000 learning and development or training and development
Yeah.
stipend. It's not about that, but it's like maybe if we can give a little bit right now,
Mhm.
and then we can see the response to it, we can
Yeah.
continue growing it. Um,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I pushed it to them. It was like, let's
Okay.
give a little and then
Mhm.
see what that response is. I mean, even for, I'm still working on it, but my winter holiday break, I'm like, I need to put a survey out there because I need to make sure that it was actually,
Yeah.
that people actually used it and not just like
Right.
worked through it.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm really curious to see the data on that. I've yet to send them over the survey, but I'm curious to see it because I'm just like, hey, and I've touched base with a couple of employees and I'm like, hey, did you use
Sure.
it? Just to kind of get a pulse on like if they actually
Yeah.
used it or not. And I promoted it the whole time. I was like getting in
Mhm.
touch with employees. And I think HR, like I'm not above, like I'm not the principal of the school.
Mhm.
I'm not the fun police. I am here
Right.
to make sure that you are supported in the workplace. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of where the misconception of HR is. Like if they just
Mhm.
think like HR sees me when I get hired and HR sees me when I get fired.
That's
And
true. Yeah.
that's like the farthest thing that I am. And I want to be able to make sure that employees do feel like they can come to me. And I think I've done a
Yeah.
great job of that where I work, especially right now, because I do reach out to employees and I ask them questions. I'm very curious. And I I always tell them if you don't tell me, then I can't work on it to improve it. I can't
That's
bring it up.
true. That's
So
right.
I do promote that. And I think for me, it's surveys. That's how I get my data. And that's kind of what I have to show leadership. Like, hey, it was
Yeah.
great. I think we need to do something about it. And that's why we had the winter holidays, was because of how successful Summer Fridays was.
I love that. Well, and one of the things that I really love about what you said, I remember again, date myself a little bit, but going back to the big .com boom when that happened, and we had all the startups out there that were good, that were popping up all over the place, and so everyone was competing for talent. And kind of to your point, I remember many of those organizations, they gave too much too fast, and the
Mhm.
problem with that is that at some point, whether I don't, depending upon where their capital funding was coming and if the company didn't take off the way that they thought it was going to, you were going to have to start taking things away. And it is much harder
Right.
to take things away from employees than it is to add things to them later.
Hmm.
And so what I like about what you were saying there is like, we can just start small. We don't have to give them the farm. We can start out with,
Hmm.
a few chickens and maybe the
Yes.
chicken coop, but we don't have to give them everything because then if something does happen and you have to pull benefits back, people take that very personal and they get very upset when when they perceive companies taking things away from them.
Yeah. And I think what I like about where I work right now is that we're very intentional with everything that we do. We don't
Yeah.
just stand on a soapbox and tell people like this is what it is and not really believe it. I
I like
think
that.
RunPod is great at making sure that we don't just put messaging out there for the sake of messaging. It's very much
Yeah.
every policy that's put in place, everything that we do across the entire company is making sure that it's something our leaders believe in. It's something our
Mhm.
employees believe in. Like I said, I don't push these policies alone. It's very much supported by leadership, making sure that
Yeah.
they're all bought in and they
Right.
know what it is. And employees
Yeah.
know that the leaders are bought in because employees can tell, right?
Oh,
They're
yeah,
like,
they can.
"Oh, so and so, I feel like they don't really want me to take time off." And I'm just like, "What do you
That's
mean?"
yeah.
Not necessarily at this company, but from what I've
Yeah,
heard from my entire career, it was just like,
absolutely.
I just don't feel like my manager is going to take the time off, so I feel like I'm not going to
Mhm.
take the time off, and I'm just like, and that gap is where those policies just fall because you're
Yes.
like, well, then this is not going to work if not everyone's bought into it.
That is so true, and it's little things, I think. It's, that whole walking the talk because I know like, I started adding on the end of my email because I might check my emails on the weekend or late at night and send
Hmm.
responses, and I try to use the scheduling when I can, so I'm not just sending it out, but if I do, I have a little, note at the end of my signature line that says, I work outside of normal working hours. Please don't take that as an obligation for
Hmm.
you to respond or to do anything with this. Just to kind of put that out there because I don't want the people who work for me to feel like they have to,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
if she's sending this and I guess I got to respond to it, I don't want them to feel that way. It's just that happens to be when I'm doing something. Doesn't mean I expect them to respond to it. And
Yeah.
so, but if you don't tell them that, or you don't mirror the behaviors you want to see, then you're right. Employees don't believe in the message that you're sending out. So,
Right. And especially when it comes from HR, because they're like, oh gosh, here he is pushing policies again. And I'm just
yeah.
like, I'm really like, it's so funny because I'll send out, like, when I do my touch points with
Uh-huh.
employees, it literally says, let's chat with like 1,000 exclamation marks so they don't think that it's something bad. And then, like,
Right.
I'll get the
Yeah.
Slack message of, hey, Jenilee, what's this about? And I'm like, I just really want
Hmm.
to check in on you and see if everything's going well. But, they kind of
Yes.
freak out when it's HR. And I'm,
That's true.
I think I'm going to spend my entire career just like trying to take that like taboo out of it.
It'll always be there. It's kinda like the, "Do you have a minute?" Message. It's like,
Yes.
"Oh, what's
Yeah.
gonna happen?" So, yeah, it's true. I think that HR has a stigma attached to it. It'll be hard to take that away for sure,
Hmm.
but hopefully in time, you'll see that. Why do you think that flexibility is so important, and why do you think it's so hard for organizations to get it right?
Um, I think it's so important because, like I said, we're going to go back to this all the time. I think
Yeah.
leadership and managers always have to support it. And
Yeah.
because you can say, like, oh, we're flexible. And then employees see you on Slack all night. And then
Mhm.
they're just like, oh, my boss is still working. And I feel like
Yeah.
I'm dropping the ball over here. And so they don't
Mhm.
feel like they actually have that flexibility, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I'm guilty of it. I feel like I have my time and I'm so open with my bosses. Like I'll put my kids down to sleep and once they're sleeping, I'm back on the laptop and I'm working,
Yeah.
right? But I think it's also just the support. I think leadership
Mhm.
and manager support is such a big thing. And I don't think that's driven enough in companies,
Mhm. I
or
agree.
focused on enough, that it's like it really starts with them. And
So true.
people tend to feel more supported if they see their
Mhm.
managers actually acting on it, instead
That
of
is
like
true.
do as I say and not as I do sort of thing where it's
Yes,
like,
yeah.
don't, but it's I think managers need to be accountable.
Yeah.
Leadership needs to be
Yeah.
accountable for making sure that policies that they actually want and believe in, that they actually want to push through, they actually believe in.
That's a really
Because
good point. Yeah.
yeah, employees will know. And I think
They do.
from with me having boots on the ground, I know when employees feel like uncomfortable, right? Because they
Yes.
feel like their
Yeah.
managers aren't bought into it or leadership isn't bought into it. They just feel like,
Yeah.
well, I don't think they are 100% in there, so I feel uncomfortable using it. I'm uncomfortable using my benefits. I'm uncomfortable using
Mhm.
these perks because I don't think
Right.
managers or management believes in it.
That's true. No, I think it's a really good point. I think we put a lot of pressure on HR, but it really is at the manager level that
Mhm.
that so much of that starts. If an HR leader who's listening feels kind of stuck because they have limited budget or maybe they have rigid structures, where would you like recommend that they start if they're trying to implement some benefits into their organization?
I think the data. I think I would pull
Mm-hmm.
data from competitors, look at like
Yeah.
for me it was like startups and tech
Mm-hmm.
companies. But also like competitors you feel like your company is going to scale to. I mean, maybe it's
That's true. That's a
like
good
you're
point.
shooting for the stars, right? And then you're
Yes.
like, I'm going to go against all Google's benefits and I'm going to go against Apple's benefits and kind of figure out on a
Yeah.
smaller scale what, this company can be one day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you kind of see that because you might want to have an Apple level engineer, a Google level
Mhm.
engineer. So
Very
if
true.
they're getting offers from these bigger companies, how are you going to compete? And how are you going to stay competitive
Yeah.
in that sense? And yes, maybe our perks and benefits aren't as robust
Mhm.
as these bigger
Sure.
companies, but it's also, you can model it as, hey, we are offering this, but we are growing and we are a fast
Mhm.
scaling startup. These are the things that we're going to be doing in the next year, and these are the
Yeah.
benefits we're offering. But I always let them know I'm constantly working on bettering our benefits and our perks. And
Yeah.
but I have to hear from you as an employee of like, what do you want to see here? And I
That's a
think
great
getting
point.
that feedback, like when you hire, I for for employees, I'm always asking like, what I know we have this benefit, but what do you think we can do to make it better for
Mhm.
next year?
Yeah.
Um, so and employees will say like sometimes that'll be like crazy, and I'm like, no, we can't. Maybe not that, not that
Right.
much, but like we're gonna work on it. We'll get there one day. But it's
Yeah.
nice to know that you get the feedback and then you bring it over to
Absolutely.
leadership. But I think honestly, starting off small, they will notice it, and they might not use it. Like I said, nobody used the paid parental leave in the beginning because we didn't really
Right.
have, nobody sort of knew. But then a year and a half has
Yeah.
passed and it's like, oh, people are becoming parents and
Yep.
now they're using it. And it's actually, we can get data now for it and see if it's
Mhm.
actually like useful to them and if they want to improve it,
Right.
or do we add more weeks and as we grow
Yeah.
sort of thing. So,
No,
I
I
mean,
like
yeah.
that. Well, and you really honed in on that is it's listening to your employees, hearing what they're saying.
Mhm.
And to your point, you can't do everything that people want, and you're never going to make everybody happy.
Oh,
But
yeah.
if you can at least hear what the general consensus is, I think that makes a really big difference in what you're doing. What do you think is like one benefit that organizations often overlook that can make a big difference to like parents or caregivers? What's something that you've seen out there that maybe is simple and organizations just overlook it?
I think for me, it's the flexibility. One is like the
Mhm.
flexibility of your schedule. Work will be done. I think, especially for
Yes.
parents, I feel like, we have extra responsibilities. We're not trying to like
Yes.
lose our jobs and we're going to work extra
Right.
hard. So I think it's the trust between your employee and your manager of like, I'm going to get the
Mhm.
work done regardless. I just
Mhm.
need to make sure that I can pick up my kid at 2:30 or 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that and I think another benefit would be like some sort of childcare stipend would be
Mhm.
amazing. I mean, like I said, it doesn't have to be like, here's $2,000 for a month, It could
Right.
be like,
Yeah.
here's $200 towards this. We know you
Mhm.
have kids. And, making sure that they're actually not just supported because they're pregnant at that time or they're having a child at that time.
Yes.
It's like, what happens
Right.
after that? Or like, can we put money towards, like, if a woman were to like
Mhm.
breastfeed during
Yeah.
like meetings or something, like you
Mhm.
put up like a safe space of like, hey, I'm
Right.
working, but I'm at work right now. I'm gonna be
Mhm.
breastfeeding my child. And I think it should be said. I don't
It
think there
should,
should
I
be
agree.
any censorship on like what I'm doing with my
No.
child because I am trying to work at the same time, which is admirable
Right.
already.
Yes,
um,
I
while I'm
totally
doing
agree.
this. So I think those go a long way. And I think employers would be like, they would be the gold standard if they just had that kind of support,
Yeah.
or offer that support.
Mhm.
Um, and then childcare, because, the kids get bigger and it's like, okay, now they have
Yes,
to go to school or now I have to get a nanny. Like, what is my
yeah,
employer doing to help me support that? And those are
right.
little things, I think, in the grand scheme of things, that they can offer, which is
Yeah.
really, I think, the payoff of your
Mm-hmm.
employee feeling supported and
Yes.
and valued is going to
Yeah.
be the payoff that you want.
I
Um,
totally agree.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that. There are several things there that you said that I really like is one, breastfeeding and all those are all just that's a part of life. We
Hmm.
have to learn to adapt and adjust to the fact
Yeah.
that we don't have to hide behind all of that. It's a
Right.
reality of what things are. So I love what you said there about like let's just call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And then that flexibility. I do think you're right. We really underestimate how important flexibility is in the workplace and being able to do that. And it's a responsibility on both sides, right? I don't think that you're saying this, and I know I don't advocate for it, that it's all one sided. It's
Hmm.
not all about the employee, it's the balance in both sides. So if you're giving the employee that flexibility, you have an expectation that the employee is doing what they need
Right.
to on this side. So it's a give and take, but it definitely is, creating that trust, which is also so important because I think that's what erodes a lot of workplaces is just
Hmm.
the lack of trust that's there. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I
yeah.
mean, micromanagement went out like in the early
Oh,
2000s. I mean,
yeah.
I just
Yes,
feel
it
like that's
did.
such a killer of culture,
Oh, it
and
is.
y-
Yes.
you need to you're hiring adults
Ye-
and they know what they're
yes.
signing in themselves into. But at the same time,
Yeah,
you kind of figure out, like, is this employee the best for me right now? But as a
that's
manager, you
right.
have to make sure that they're supported. Are you giving them the resources,
That's right.
tools,
Yeah.
right?
Hey everyone, we're the Her Resources podcast, where women share real stories, real lessons, and the resources that help them succeed. We're always looking for inspiring women, business leaders, creatives, educators, and changemakers who want to share their journey and empower others. If that sounds like you, we'd love to hear your story. Reach out to us at contact@herresourcespodcast.com and let's start the conversation. How do you think the future, or how do you see the future of benefits kind of evolving as the workplace continues to change?
I think it's going to be evolving all the time. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
always kind of thinking of, like, what I can do to make it better for the next year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like, hey, we have a pet page on our Slack channel where people share
Yeah.
their pets. I'm like, it'd be super cool if we can, like, offer pet insurance, because those things are really
Right.
expensive, right?
They are very
So,
expensive.
and
Yeah.
not everybody is a parent, but there are people who are fur parents.
Yes, there
So it's like,
are.
how
Yeah.
can we do to support, what can we do to support them? And so those are things that I think about. We're not just talking about parents here, we're not just talking about
Mm-hmm.
people who aren't married or who are married. It's like there's so many different things that people are
Yeah.
into or that they're doing or they're part of their hobbies. It's like, what can we do to
Yeah.
make sure that we support them outside of the workplace and not just
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing here at work? They are human beings, they're not just employees.
Yes, yes, I totally agree with that. We forget that so often that people are, it's that human side of it. And we do forget that they have
Hmm.
lives outside of work for sure. What gives you hope about how organizations are beginning to rethink the support for working parents, for just for employees in general? Like what's given you hope about what's changing in organizations?
I think organizations are, like, evolving in a way that there's more
Mm-hmm.
women leaders in the workforce.
Mhm.
And I think that changes the dynamic a lot,
I agree.
because usually it's like, oh, the men are up top and then they're the ones making the money and
Mhm.
they hold the highest positions, right? But
Yeah.
now women are coming in and then they're holding the higher positions.
Mhm.
And it's like they're seeing the landscape a little bit differently, you
Yeah.
know? So my hope is that it's going to continue that way, where it's more of a flexible workforce,
Yeah.
a kinder, more empathetic workforce. And
Yeah.
I'm hopeful for that, in that we think of it more as these are not robots in your company. These are
Mhm.
human beings,
Yes.
and they are valuable. And obviously,
Mhm.
you've hired them for their skills and experience. So
Right.
we should treat them as such. And that, taking care of them is really just the base. It's like the foundation of them
Yeah.
doing amazing things for your company.
I totally agree with that. I've always been a big proponent of that, if you were willing to, it's that, you scratch my back, I scratch your back type
Mhm.
of approach to things. But if you take care of your employees, because it doesn't matter how many benefits or how much money you throw at them, if they don't feel supported and they don't feel like it's a culture of I like what you said, empathetic and really kind of looking at it through that lens that I'm not just a cog in the wheel. I'm a human being. I have a life. Maybe I have a spouse or a partner. I have
Mhm.
children. I have, animals. All of those things are affecting my life and how I'm interacting. And my job is a part of that, but it's not all of it. And
Mhm.
so, but if you take care of me, I'm willing to take care of you in return.
Exactly.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
yeah, when I do, when I talk to the managers, I'm always like, the first thing you should do in your one-on-ones is thank people. Thank them for their work. That's how
Yes.
you should always start your one-on-ones is
I
like, thank you so
agree.
much for the things that you've done this past week. And like really pinpoint like the things that they've done.
Yes.
So they don't think
I
that it's just
actually
a
know
random
what
thank
they've
you.
done. Exactly. Yeah,
Yes,
I'm not just giving you
exactly.
that generic thank you. I
Hmm.
actually know some things that you've done.
Yes.
So,
Because I think
yeah,
that sets the
yeah.
tone.
I
And then
think
they
so
feel like
too.
it's so positive now that I'm willing to like be more enthusiastic about this week, right?
Yeah.
And like if you have a
Yes.
stand up, like, like in a group of people where there's like 7 of you in your team, I always let the managers know, like when I talk to the managers, I'm like, hey, what you should do? The first thing you should do is thank each person in front of their colleagues.
That's right, in front of their peers. I
Yeah.
agree.
Then you
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
like start that chain reaction of like being
Absolutely.
grateful. I mean, I think that's one of the things too. It's like, you know, in fast moving companies, I think
Mhm.
that's one of the things that's like missing is just remembering to say thank you
I
and
agree.
and
Yeah.
just being grateful for like your colleagues and like the things that are being done.
Yes.
So I think that's the biggest like thing for me in terms of just how managers can support their
Yeah.
teams.
I like that. What is one thing HR leaders need to start doing?
Really checking in on their people.
Mm,
I think
good one.
not being so far removed because everybody, like I said, everybody sees HR as like, I see you
Mhm.
when you get hired and I see you when you get fired. And
So
take that
true.
stigma out and just really connect. Make sure that you're like, hey, like I said, if I'm putting a calendar invite and I'm like, let's chat with like a happy face, like emoji and all of that stuff. I'm just
Yep.
literally trying to make sure that you're doing okay. And I think checking
Yeah.
in, and I know, some organizations, they have the HRBPs that do that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But in smaller companies like mine, I'm the sole HR
Yeah,
person. And it's like,
that's right.
I will make it a point to connect with the people
Mm,
to make sure that they're doing okay
I
and
like
that
that.
their managers are supporting them. I check in with the managers too to be like, hey, how's it going? How's your team
Yes.
doing? I think being visible, HR needs to be visible. That's the only way you think you'll get a
Yes.
seat at the table.
I totally agree with that, for sure. What do you think is one benefit that every organization should get right?
Healthcare.
Healthcare.
And I say that because we live in the United States and,
Yes.
when your healthcare is tied to your employer,
Yeah,
it's I think one of the biggest drivers. You can lose good talent with not
so
having good
true.
healthcare.
So true. I think that's a really good point. And because exactly what you said, we live in the United States, healthcare is so critical to us. It's the
Mhm.
only way to get access to what you need. And when it is tied to your employer, it is really
Yeah. And
important. Yeah.
I think, I mean, to say I think healthcare with adding dependence. I'm gonna just take it one notch higher because,
Yes.
sometimes if I think when people think dependence, they think children.
Mhm. I
And then they're
agree
like,
with you. Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like she has children or he has children and he's gonna be so busy. And, it's like, well, the spouse is part of it too, right? So if your spouse loses
Yes.
their job, then what
That's
happens
right.
there? So it
Absolutely.
sort of like financially upends you if you're not
Mhm.
supporting dependents. And
Yeah.
I think that needs to be clearly said at companies where it's like dependents are not only children, but it's also your
Yeah.
spouse or your partner.
That's a really good call out. I totally agree. What's one piece of advice you would give for a working parent who feels unsupported in their work?
Talk to your manager,
Mm,
just see if you guys are aligned. I think that's where it is. A lot of employees are afraid to talk to their managers, and
mhm.
maybe that's probably because in their past career experience they've not had
Mhm.
supportive managers. But I really
Yeah.
think it's worth talking to them, like, and making sure that they know like what goes on in your life, because if you're not
Yeah.
transparent enough,
Mhm.
they're just gonna think everything is fine and that you don't
That's
have to
true.
pick up your kid, and then you're gonna lie about it and be like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm doing this. And it's like, just be as transparent as you can. And if the
Yeah.
manager isn't supportive, maybe that role isn't, or that
That's right.
role
Maybe
isn't for
that
you, right?
organization isn't for you.
Yeah.
I agree.
So,
Yeah.
and I know, like, we live in a world right now where it's like, jobs, it's hard to lose your job,
That's
right?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think mental health in your work
Yes,
is also very important, and you need to
it
feel like
is.
you can go in without being scared and being
Yeah.
afraid to lose your job. And I couldn't emphasize that enough, is that you have to make
Yeah.
sure that you feel supported, and you're not just
Yeah.
there to be like gritting your teeth throughout the entire 8 hours.
Right. Yes, that's so true. Well, and you're not productive in those environments.
Mhm.
I mean, employees who feel unsafe or unsupported, or they feel like they have to lie about their situation. You're right. They're likely not
Mhm.
performing at their peak level either
Exactly.
because they can't give their all when they feel that way. So,
Yeah,
yeah, really good
exactly.
point. My last question for you is you talked a lot about taking care of employees and taking care of managers. What are you doing to take care of yourself? You're in a challenging position being especially in smaller companies, like you said, you're wearing all the hats of HR. So what are you doing to take care of you?
Um, I have to work on that actually. I mean, it's hard because it's like, I think, what is on my mind all the time is the motherhood tax. And
Yeah.
it's just constantly being like, I got to this point in my career and it took me this long, and then I'm a mother and I have to do all the things. And it's like, you don't want to drop that ball. You want to show
No.
that you can do both, right? And be
Hmm.
like, I am going to thrive as a career woman and I'm going to thrive as a mother. But I
Yeah.
think that's where it's kind of like, well, are you really thriving as Jenilee? and
Yes.
and it's hard. I think it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I'm like, I always tell my husband, I'm like, I'm a recovering people pleaser. And so I have to kind of like figure out my boundaries, and
Yeah.
being able to say no, or being able to be like, hey, I don't think that's correct, or but I do struggle with it, in that I'm like, somebody messaged me and they need this. I can't let their health insurance, um
Right.
fall on the wayside. I have to take care of them. And I think that's just, honestly, it's just a natural instinct, especially as a mother.
I
Like,
think so. Yeah.
it's just kind of mushes together. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a work in progress when it comes to like setting boundaries for myself.
That's fair. Well, I would highly encourage you to make sure that you take care of yourself and find some balance in all of that as well, because you're doing clearly an amazing job taking care of all of the people who rely on you every day. So,
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate
yeah.
that.
Absolutely. Well, Jenny, it has been so great having you on the show. I've enjoyed our conversation. It's just so important to have these types of honest communication, I think. And I want to thank you for sharing your perspective as well, and for the work that you do to really make the workforce more human. What I love about what you talked about today, and so often we have women on who are working for big companies, and you're working for a smaller company. You're wearing multiple hats, and I think it's a great perspective to bring in from an HR. So thank you so much for connecting with me to bring that side of the story. I think it's such an important one. So um, but to all of our listeners out there too, if this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to share it with a leader, an HR partner, or anyone who is involved in shaping workplace benefits. And these conversations matter. matter, and change starts with awareness and action. So be sure to subscribe to the Her Resources podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on LinkedIn and for more information or for more conversations centered on women, leadership, and the future of work. And until next time, take care of yourself and remember that better workplaces start with people. Thanks so much, Jenilee.
Thank you so much, Linda.
You've been listening to the Her Resources podcast, where women's voices, leadership, and growth take center stage. As your host, I'm here to remind you that the journey isn't always easy, but it is always worth it. Every step you take to build confidence, create impact, or use your voice is part of a much bigger story. It's the one that inspires others to do the same. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with another woman who's ready to step into her power. And as always, thank you for being a part of this community. Together, we're not just changing conversations, we're changing the future.